But it's also important to understand that not all the statues were destroyed. Next slide shows you one statue that wasn't completely destroyed. This is a statue of Ramesses II from his temple at Abu Simbel. Even though that nose is missing and the top part of the lip is a little shattered, you can still tell that brother may look like your Uncle Joe or your neighbor from down the street, still is a brother. But it's important to understand the extent to which Europeans had to recreate the images of the ancient Africans. Next slide shows you an image of the same king that was built during the Roman occupation of Egypt. Y'all thought Michael Jackson was the first person that underwent a drastic nose job? No. Greeks have been doing this for years. And this process continues to this very day. The next slide we see National Geographic, 1966, gave us this image of a Caucasian Ramesses. Now we know that these people were African. So how can this institution dare to portray him as Caucasian? They can do it because we let them get away with the lie. You have to challenge them at every turn. See, because they're not going to stop. They're going to continue to claim everything that is yours, as long as you continue to let them get away with it. The next slide shows you this same process, the Europeanization of Africa. This is from, believe it or not, from Ripley's Believe It or Not. 1983 says here the Pharaoh Ramesses II, who ruled Egypt for some 67 years from about 1292 to 1225 BC, often rode into battle with a trained lion which fiercely attacked his foes. That statement is true. But the portrayal of Ramesses as a Caucasian is a lie. Here you see Ramesses as a Caucasian fighting Africans. Ramesses was an African. He did fight other Africans, but he also fought Asians. There's a very famous battle, the Battle of Kadesh, which is painted on the entrance to the temple at Luxor and the temple of Abu Simbel, that describes his battle in Asia, fighting Asians. So if you don't know your history, sisters and brothers, you all will not be able to exercise the option that Mr. Ripley gives to you when he tells you to believe it or not. You won't know what to believe. Next slide. Now, remember the image of the two beards of Haremachit? And I showed you how to discern the original from the copy. I want to do the same thing with this image of Nefertiti. Now, I ran across this image at a bookstore in London, directly across the street from the British Museum. It is a German publication. This is on the cover of this publication. As we know, the bust of Nefertiti was an unfinished sculpture that was found on the floor of an abandoned artist studio. It was never finished. It was unlabeled. So the German Egyptologists who discovered it didn't have the faintest idea who it was. They just assumed it was Nefertiti. Assumed that it was Nefertiti. So this image was doctored up, and I want to show you how to identify the fact that this is the original image of Nefertiti. You see here a crack that runs down the entire crown, runs past the ear, which explains why the ear is damaged. It also extends down beneath her neck, which means that this statue was originally broken into at least 3 different pieces. You see here a gash above her eyebrow. You see here a hole in her ear where an earring once was. This is the original bust of Nefertiti. Now, sisters and brothers, what the Germans did is the same thing that the French have done, the same thing that the English have done. Whenever they find something that's a little bit too black, they'll take it in the back room and they'll doctor it up. Copy. But also what they did in making this copy was to lighten the skin and then make the nose and the lips smaller than the original. So we have to understand what has been happening to our history, to our culture, and to our images over thousands of years. Next slide. Now, I want to take you back to this temple of Ramesses II in Luxor, and I want to focus your attention specifically on this object here. This is called a tekken. Many of us know it by its Greek name, an obelisk. This is a symbol that was created in Kemet, a symbol that was designed to represent the resurrection of Asar. Remember I told you earlier, and you all should be familiar with the story, Asar was murdered and was later resurrected. And so this symbol here, the tekken, came to represent the resurrection of Asar. There were at one time over 1,200 of these structures throughout all of Kemet. Wherever you saw there was at one time 2 of these structures flanking the entrance to this particular temple. Almost every temple had 2 tekkenu. Wherever you see 2 tekkenu standing in tandem with one another, they represent the masculine and feminine complementary aspects of the Creator. All right? But it's important for us to understand that in 1833, after Egypt was then ruled by the Arabs, Muhammad Ali, the Turkish ruler, Muhammad Ali, who was then the ruler of Egypt, who didn't have any affinity with the culture of the ancient Kemites, saw nothing wrong with giving this other tekken to his good friend, King Louis Philippe of France. Gave it to him as a gift in exchange for a clock which Muhammad Ali put in his mosque. And the next slide shows you this clock that was given to him by King Louis Philippe, a clock that never worked, all right, stands at the citadel at the mosque of Muhammad Ali in Cairo. And King Louis Philippe's gift, the next slide, now stands majestically at the Place de la Concorde in Paris, France. Now, understand what this structure is. It is a symbol. It has a variety of meanings, but I want to focus on just one interpretation tonight. It is a symbol which represents the resurrection of Asar, the first story of a resurrected Savior. It is a symbol of an African God. Today, there are probably less than a dozen of these structures in Kemet. The rest have been scattered all over the world. Next slide shows you, yeah, there's one right here in Central Park. That's right. It's growing. And there's a wonderful story. As a matter of fact, the next volume of this series, Exploding the Myths, is going to deal specifically with the European theft of African monuments. It's tentatively called An African-Centered View of Washington, D.C., Masonry in the United States, in which we're going to talk about the European lust for African monuments, their attempt to recreate the essence, the spirit of ancient Kemet in the United States of America. Here is an African tekken that stands in the center of St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Every Easter Sunday, the next slide, every Easter Sunday as the Pope stands, okay, I don't have it. Every Easter Sunday, as the Pope stands on his balcony delivering his Easter sermon, he stands before a 6,000-year-old monument that represents the resurrection of an African God. The Pope knows that. That's why the Pope prays to images of Aset and Heru, the African Madonna and Child. Every time the Pope goes to his homeland in Czeskowa, Poland, he prays at the shrine of the Black Madonna and Child. He knows what the real deal is. African tekkenu in England. Next slide. Everywhere you go, you find African symbols. Here is a symbol. This is in Charlestown, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. A memorial built to honor the European Americans who died fighting in the Revolutionary War. Now think about this reality. They are fighting the British for the control of the land that they took from the Native Americans. And in honoring their dead, they do not use a British monument or a French monument or a Greek monument. They use an African monument. Why? Because of the secret reverence they have for those things that sprang from the minds of African people. This is an important reality that we have to understand. Next slide, please. Here, all right, my hometown, my current hometown is Washington, D.C. We have a tour, an African-centered tour of Washington that I created back in 1986. And it was a tour that I did. I had just come back from my second trip to Kemet. And I kept, the trip was fresh on my mind. And as I drove around the city of Washington, I kept getting flashbacks to things that I had seen in Kemet. And then, it suddenly dawned upon me that there were a host of objects in Washington, D.C. that were similar to things that I had seen in Kemet. So what I did was to identify a number of these objects and to develop a tour that dealt specifically with the design of Washington, D.C. based upon African concepts of city planning, African concepts of monumental architecture. And so what I want to show you in these next few series of slides is the extent to which those responsible for creating the capital of the United States of America borrowed from your ancestors. Here is, wait, go back, brother, go back. Don't jump in now. This is the Washington Monument, the tallest Tekken in the world. Again, realize that this is a symbol that represents the resurrection of an African god. This symbol is now the symbol for the most powerful nation on the face of this planet. Here you see the reflection of the monument in its reflection pool. And all you have to do is to study the architectural styles developed by our African ancestors to realize that this is nothing but a pale imitation of an African original. The next slide shows you the Apet-i-Sut or Karnak Temple in Kemet, two standing Tekkenu and their reflection in their reflection pool. Every temple in Kemet had Tekkenu. Every temple in Kemet had a sacred lake. So you can begin to see where these ideas came from and how they influenced your European masters. Next slide. Here's a photograph that I ran across a couple of years ago. In 1912, a committee was established to build a memorial to Abraham Lincoln, okay? And John Russell Pope, one of the most famous architects of Washington, D.C., designed a number of really famous structures, submitted this drawing as a memorial for Abraham Lincoln. This is a drawing of a scale model of Khufu's pyramid as a memorial for Abraham Lincoln. Now, the members on that committee rejected this drawing because it was, quote unquote, unoriginal and would have been a little bit too obvious as to what their inspiration was. So they rejected his design and they opted for the more traditional Greco-Roman style architectural structure, which you see in the next slide here. All right? They opted for this structure here. But what's interesting to note is that the artist, the sculptor that they hired to create the statue of Abraham Lincoln in the memorial, borrowed from an image that can be found in the Nile Valley. The next slide shows you Abraham Lincoln sitting on his throne in the Lincoln Memorial. That was inspired by the next slide, Ramesses II seated on his throne in Abu Simbel. Again, if you understand the symbols, if you know how to interpret the symbols, you can find your history anywhere. You can walk down the street, any city in the United States, and see your historical greatness. Next slide. Memphis, Tennessee, 2 years ago, built this scale model of Khufu's pyramid, a 33-story pyramid. They're even talking about, or should I say, there was talk at one point in time about putting Elvis's body in his pyramid at what would be the equivalent of the king's chamber. But it's significant for us to understand something about the history of Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis was founded by Andrew Jackson along with two other individuals. He designated that site in Tennessee alongside the Mississippi River because the Mississippi reminded him of the Nile River in Egypt. You all are aware of the fact that the city of Memphis is a Greek interpretation of an African name. The African name is the city of Mennefer. It was renamed Memphis. It was the capital of Kemet. It is where the king of Kemet lived in his palace, his royal palace, which was called the Double White House. Okay? So Andrew Jackson built Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee, to this very day, has a sister city relationship with Memphis and Kemet. If you were to go up the Mississippi River to my home state of Illinois, you'll find at the tip of Illinois an African city named Cairo, Illinois.